You're listening to the DVM Podcast Empire.
Now with over 1 million downloads.
1 million downloads.
Find us online at DVMPE.com.
100% free.
1,000,000% fan.
And now,
Push the button.
Thank you for tuning in to Push the Button, episode number 4. This episode, we're going to be talking about the recent Supreme Court ruling over the Hobby Lobby case. And, of course, the discussion couldn't help but touch on abortion. We also have a couple of special guests join the program, so enjoy and don't get hot.
Is it possible that we have permitted ideology, political and economic philosophies, and governmental policies to keep us from considering the very real, everyday problems of our people?
So what if my feelings are hurt? Does that give me the right to prevent others from expressing their opinions?
Wait a second, Doc! Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.
The biggest one we're waiting on at this point is Hobby Lobby. This is the challenge to the administration's HHS contraception mandate.
That's right. Hobby Lobby, America's one-stop source for glitter and googly eyes, could soon also be America's leading source of landmark binding legal precedents. Hobby Lobby's owners say that Obamacare's contraception mandate conflicts with their Christian faith, which means the whole case boils down to one fundamental question.
Can a business, a for-profit corporation, claim it has freedom of religion?
Do for-profit corporations have religious rights?
Do corporations have religious liberties, or do just individuals?
Are corporations a person able to exercise religious rights?
No, they're not. Okay, are we done? Are we done here?
Hi there, button pushers. As the lucky owner of a full complement of lady bits, I feel compelled to weigh in on the recent Supreme Court ruling in regards to women's health. This decision states that closely held for-profit corporations run on religious principles can refuse coverage of certain contraceptives by the insurance they provide to their employees. Justice Alito asserts that the scope is limited by their wording and that corporations that object to other laws on religious grounds would be unlikely to prevail. Certainly, the decision is limited. Currently. However, Justice Ginsburg warns that it could be used to apply to all corporations and to countless laws. This ruling has given other corporations a foot in the door to object to all manner of things. If you don't believe this is possible, take a look at RICO, Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. It was initially only intended to be used as a tool against the mafia. Look at how much more we've learned that the Patriot Act has allowed the government to do than we were led to believe it would allow. Once a legal door has been opened, a slippery slope waits on the other side. Perhaps that won't come to pass, but it should alarm everyone that the possibility exists. How will they determine exactly how religious is religious enough for a company to extract those benefits from their workers? I can tell you that I have worked for a closely held family-owned company. My boss sat across from me one day and complained to my face about how much my uterus was costing him. His words. Corruption in government is so prevalent it's cliche, and I find it hard to believe that there won't be a large number of brand new converts lining up to keep some money in their pockets. No, this exemption does not currently extend beyond the contraceptive items in contest. However, Justice Ginsburg asks in her dissent whether the exemption would extend to blood transfusions, antidepressants, anesthesia, or pills coated in gelatin and vaccinations. It can be made to extend to those things. It does not now. But this is what legal creep means. She further states, approving some religious claims while deeming others unworthy of accommodation could be perceived as favoring one religion over another, the very risk the Constitution's Establishment Clause was designed to preclude. Despite what some people believe, this ruling will absolutely hurt women. It takes away options for women to plan for what is right for their bodies, their lives, and their families. I read Justice Alito's ideas on how women that are denied this coverage by their employers can still obtain help from the government, or by forcing the insurance companies to cover it as they do for nonprofits. Adding extra layers to the process for women to obtain the medication that they need for medical conditions and for their own family planning will hurt women. If not directly from this one ruling, then from the rulings that will derive from it. The more we set contraception and women's health aside as a separate issue, the easier it will become for them to be seen as different from other health issues. The more different they become, the easier it will be for courts to decide that companies don't have to cover them. It's science. The contraceptives in question are Plan B, Ella, and 2 IUDs. There are a lot of suppositions floating around about how these work and what they actually do. Here's the truth as supplied by the Mayo Clinic. None of these contraceptives are used for abortions. Plan B works in one of 3 ways. It either prevents ovulation, blocks fertilization, or prevents a fertilized egg from implanting on the uterine wall. Once a fertilized egg has implanted on the uterine wall, Plan B does not work. It has been proven that it will not harm an established pregnancy. Ella works in the same ways, but there are proven risks to existing pregnancy. This is why it is prescription only. A doctor has to see you before you're given this medication, and I believe that we should trust what a woman's doctor advises for her because that is why they went to medical school. Nobody can walk in off the street and buy Ella to try to terminate her pregnancy. Intrauterine devices prevent pregnancy by preventing sperm from reaching or fertilizing an egg. It also thins the lining of the uterus and partially suppresses ovulation. These are obviously only given to women that are not currently pregnant and are over 99% effective at preventing pregnancy for up to 10 years. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists filed a brief stating the following: emergency contraception will not disrupt an established pregnancy. Women often are exposed to exogenous hormones in early pregnancy without adverse outcome. Some women undergoing assisted reproductive technology procedures to achieve pregnancy are routinely prescribed progesterone to support the pregnancy. It is also a common occurrence to interview patients in early pregnancy who were not aware that their missed pills had resulted in contraceptive failure and who thus had continued taking their pills. Application of treatments. While Hobby Lobby says they will continue to cover 16 of the 20 contraceptives, it's important to again revisit the idea of this being a foot in the door for other changes to women's care. While birth control pills are still covered by them now, their use in the future is in jeopardy from this ruling. Birth control pills are not only used to prevent pregnancy. There are many reasons why women and girls are prescribed the pill by their doctor. Among these are endometriosis, acne, polycystic ovary syndrome, menstrual cramps, a lack of periods, and lowers the chance of getting endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer, and ovarian cysts. Let's just discuss one of the most common uses for the pill: extreme cramping during the menstrual cycle. I know that there are many women that have very little discomfort from cramps. I even know some that have never experienced them at all. Then there is this segment of the population that is like me. For us, the cramping we experience is so extreme that it disrupts our lives. I was prescribed birth control in high school because the pain was causing me to miss entire days of school. To put this in some context, I walked around on a broken leg for a full day in college before I decided that I might need to see a doctor about my sprained ankle. I have a very high pain tolerance, and I am virtually incapacitated for several days a month. There are a myriad of reasons why a doctor and his or her patient decide on a certain kind of treatment. Limiting what women have access to via their insurance is putting a stumbling block in their path. It is not the place of the government or an employer to decide what women should be allowed to do with their bodies. Inequality in sexual health treatments. Hobby Lobby's insurance plan continues to cover both Viagra and vasectomies for their male employees. For a company that believes it is immoral for a woman to use a product that will keep her ovaries from releasing an egg, it seems awfully hypocritical that they are perfectly comfortable with a procedure that halts the emission of sperm during the sex act. Hobby Lobby is money grubby. While the company cites religious reasons for refusing to cover contraceptives, they are currently investing in the companies that make those contraceptives to fund their retirement program. At least 8 of the mutual funds they use fall under that category. Among those companies are Teva Pharmaceutical, maker of Plan B, Bayer, Pfizer, and Force Laboratories, who actually makes a drug that is used to induce abortions. I understand and respect that the subject of abortion is a hot-button issue for many, if not most people. However, I think it's important to note that a recent study by Washington University concluded that access to free birth control cuts abortion rates by a range of 62 to 78% compared to the national rate. I'd like to thank all of you gentlemen out there for sticking in with me while I talk about all the lady parts that you may be uncomfortable hearing about. I'm stepping off my soapbox now. Love you, love your show. This is Lindsay Monroe Bauer.
Don't push it.
Hey everybody, welcome back once again to Push the Button, your number one podcast for all your hot button needs. I am your host, DVMPE.
And ladies and gentlemen, I am your other host, Mr. Anderson. Anderson.
Oh, see, I waited this time.
You did.
I had to do it at least once for you.
Yes.
Just wanted to say, it's good to be back with you. We recorded a bunch of episodes together before, and we've been releasing them, and now we're ready to get back together. The breaks of working with a working man on the road.
Yeah, we sort of took a little hiatus while I went to New York for almost 2 weeks.
Yeah, how about it? But we're back, and boy, what a time to get back together. Some hot button issues already hitting out there in the world. Let's just talk about the number one thing that just happened this week. Ken, let's lay it out for you today.
Well, the United States Supreme Court voted in a 5-4 decision that the government cannot require certain employers to provide insurance coverage for birth control if they conflict with the employer's religious beliefs.
I will be honest right off the bat and say I was in one position when I first heard about the ruling. I was for the ruling at first. Regrettably, my biggest error was I was not fully educated on the case.
And I'm going to say that I am not fully educated, according to something that you just told me, which you will inform our viewers about.
Yes.
Or our listeners about.
Which ironically changed my position. But yes, okay, so before all of our listeners just turn us off right away and go, oh, well, these guys are jerks. Here's what happened. Hobby Lobby was being told by the United States government that they had to provide health care, and this was through the Affordable Care Act.
As were all other corporations.
Every single other corporation in the United States of America who was legally operating under the rule of law.
Which, the rule of law that we're talking about here would be Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act.
Right. And so I wanted to make sure I called it the Affordable Care Act so I wasn't accused of being insensitive, but it is, everybody knows it as Obamacare. So, under the Obamacare health care coverage law, the Affordable Care Act, it is stated that basically all employers are required to provide affordable health care to their employees. Up until the Affordable Care Act was made law, a lot of employers did offer them, but they were simply known as a benefit. It was something that they could choose to offer or not offer. That is no longer the case. That is now mandatory for all corporations. Whether you agree with that or not is not in question because it is the law. So that means...
I'd like to say that Hobby Lobby doesn't object to birth control across the board. They don't object to the pill. This just applies to IUDs in the morning after pill.
Correct. So these are what I think the quote was, specific kinds of birth control. Okay, so, and this is where I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to start to fall one side of the camp or the other or whatever, but where Hobby Lobby's position was, and we'll get into more specifics as we go down, but where Hobby Lobby's position was, hey, you can't, big government, you can't tell me that I have to provide a specific type of birth control if I feel, I being Hobby Lobby, feel that it is a deplorable technique, or I've heard terms as saying it's a disgusting technique, and this falls under the opinion that anything post-conception is considered fetal termination or abortion, and so they said that, you know, when questioned, why do you feel that way, the response is it's a religious belief. And this coincides with the episode we just released, but what gets into more crazy detail is they said, okay, so because of this, they were actually refusing, I don't know if you remember this a few months ago or maybe even last year when it first got rolled out, but they were actually refusing to do so. And so they were being fined. And it was some crazy, like, $1 million a day fine that they were being fined. And it was kind of like this thing where they were saying, this is going to be so weird because I know the listeners are going to be confused on where I stand on this, but believe me, if you hang on, you'll get there. In Hobby Lobby's defense, they were saying, if you're mandating this healthcare law onto us, we feel like it's against our religious freedoms. And therefore we can't pay it. And so the United States government says, well, you'll be fined $1 million a day for every day beyond the deadline that you don't provide it. They say, well, you're trying to shut us down. The government says, we're not trying to shut you down. We're just making you pay a fine. Now, realistically, and this is where we get a little crazy here. This is, as I live and breathe Chicago politics, I'll say, it'd be a terrible shame if something happened to that pretty nice window in front of your shop here, So, yeah, they're not saying they're going to shut you down, but $1 million.
They're going to shut you down.
They're going to shut you down. And so it does start the question of, hey, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel that that's the appropriate freedom that we have as Americans. Well, hey, are they Americans or are they a corporation? And that's where it starts to get a little gray.
And I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but where do you draw the line then?
Right.
I can start any religion that I want to in this country. What if I decide that I'm a biblical literalist, and I believe that women should be silent because it says so in the Bible.
Well, and that's
that it says so in the Bible. So therefore, the women that I employ, if I choose to employ any women at all, shall be silent. Is this acceptable under my religious freedoms and my religious protections?
Right, and that's the fear that is now being established by the American public, because what's to stop anyone from claiming religious freedom? And agreeably so. If we had followed the separation of church and state, this wouldn't be an issue, but we're not. So we have to really dig into this a little more. The first question is, why does Hobby Lobby feel, as a corporation, it has the right to refuse that?
Well, I'd just like to go back a little bit and just say that, and this is just my gut feeling. Obviously, we have to take people at their word. Mm-hmm. But my gut feeling is that this corporation was pissed off about the Affordable Care Act in the first place. And this is sort of just a reason. They're just looking for something to oppose it.
That actually sounds most probable and likely. Because it has also been brought to our attention from our awesome listeners that you are out there with your emails and input, that Hobby Lobby, ironically, is actually funding organizations that actually also do produce the morning after pill.
Well, and in that situation, I have to give them just a little bit of leeway because, as an investor, I don't necessarily always know what I'm investing in.
Sure.
When you invest into a mutual fund, you're, giving that trust over to somebody else that they invest for you.
Sure.
So I believe in a lot of these cases. Basically what they're saying is that some of the benefits that Hobby Lobby gives to their employees, some of their 401k programs, I assume, invest in corporations which, give money to, or to the direct corporations that are responsible for these drugs.
Right.
Morning after pill, the IUD, etc.
Well, and then,
and like I said, I don't necessarily know right now exactly everything that I'm invested in.
See, that's a tough spot, but see, you're also not taking a case to the Supreme Court.
Stance.
You're not taking a case to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So I would argue that you have a responsibility to be aware of everything you're involved in.
That is a good point.
Hey, for just normal, everyday Americans looking to trade, hey, that's fine. But yeah, if you're getting to a point where, like you said, if you're taking a hardline stance on something, you need to at least make sure that your ducks in a row. I mean, where's your attorneys going, hey, let's make sure our backyards are clean before we start, poking in everybody else's. But there's so much more here. There's so much more here that's going on. I mean, first of all, the flat-out issue is the Supreme Court ruled in their favor, saying that because the corporation has religious freedom, this does encroach on it. Whether you agree with it or not, it is officially law now. So,
and this ruling applies only to corporations which are, quote, closely held, which the Supreme Court defines as a corporation made up of where 5 or fewer people own more than half of the corporation.
Okay.
So I believe my corporation would be.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So
I'd be protected.
Yeah. But maybe yeah, and previous corporations you may have worked for.
Yes.
But guess a little something for the wrestling fans. So okay, so
if they gave health insurance,
right. Okay, that's another episode. So okay, yeah, and you know what? This is just such a heavy thing, man. And the only reason why I really even wanted to talk about it was a lot of our DVM Podcast Empire podcasters were very passionate about it, and we had some personal. I literally had some personal responses from some of our contributors who were like, hey, we really want to talk about these things. And I'm like, hey, we talk about TV shows. And they're like, well, please, can we do it on Push the Button? And I thought, you know what? That is the perfect forum for it. So that is why we're talking about it today. So we want to let you guys know that we understand that there are people on all sides of the issue.
And I have to say that when you look at this issue, what it really boils down to is what this potentially results in are unplanned pregnancies, are unwanted pregnancies, which result in more abortions, which are costly and harmful to the woman, potentially.
Well, and I want to take a step back for a little bit. What you just said about how it potentially creates that. The White House did come out and say, or no, it was the Supreme Court did come out and say that it would not be completely limited from them. They would still have access to them under the Affordable Care Act.
Gotcha.
Just not delivered to them by Hobby Lobby. But, I mean, there is an issue of, and you start really getting into, is it a level of convenience? Well, then, what's the issue there? And it's hard. We talked about it in the previous episode about, where does religion come into play? Our morality come into play? I mean, where is our morality and what should be considered morality? What should be considered, right and wrong? These are tough things. These are tough things that even our forefathers couldn't figure out.
I guess I'd like to know where their basis for this belief comes from.
Right. Well, and that's when you want to get into some of the more scientific information, which we can definitely do. But I think the first thing I'd like to do, if you're willing, is to bring on a guest, because first of all, the biggest argument is that there is a new jeopardy being placed on women. And the last 2 people on earth who should have anything to say about women's rights is 2 guys. So if you're willing, I'd like to bring in one of our contributors.
Please, by all means, do so.
Cheryl is a redhead fire liberal.
Yes, I am. I'm about as socially liberal as they come, bitches.
And as Ken and I were just saying, the last 2 people on earth who should be talking about women's rights is he and I. So we wanted to
sausage fest.
Yeah. So we wanted to bring you in, and first of all, I just wanted to get your opinion of the Supreme Court ruling and wanted to hear what your thoughts were.
Good old SCOTUS, right? I have a couple of thoughts. First, my general overarching belief is that my little liberal heart must respect your beliefs, and your right to have those beliefs, no matter how much I abhor them. but you better not try to fucking put them on me. So in reading SCOTUS, or reading the decision for SCOTUS and the dissension, I clearly see the companies, with the permission of the courts, forcing one person's religious beliefs on women, and only women, who may or may not share that religion, those views, their radicalism, and I believe it equates to a war on women's rights, and it violates my religious freedom.
So
Take that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. And I, as I stated earlier, Cheryl, you weren't with us yet, but, where do we draw the line here? And I stated earlier, if my religious beliefs state that women are to be subservient and silent, because I read so in the Old Testament and in the New Testament for that matter.
Right? Yeah.
If I believe this, am I therefore, is it acceptable for me to treat women a certain way or to not hire women? I mean, where do we draw the line?
No, I absolutely agree. And then that's one of the things, when I hear things are very controversial or decisions that are made, I always think, what is the precedent that's going to be set by this? And I see precedents up the fucking ass. I see people not wanting to cover diabetic medications because some of them are derived from pigs. I see the anti-vaxxers not wanting vaccines covered under their policies. I see, Scientologists not wanting to cover mental health drugs. I guess I can't even think of it anymore.
Who are the people that go door to door again? I keep forgetting.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses are anti-blood transfusions. So,
and I think they're anti-surgery too.
Well, and then there's people who are anti-medical involvement at all. So take all the cancer drugs right off of their medical plans.
Right. Yeah, it does. It's scary. I think there's no doubt that it has the potential for getting way out of hand. And under any other circumstance, I would say it's not that big of a deal, but we do have a tendency to get out of hand. So I absolutely think that it's a problem.
Well, but put all those possibilities on the table, right? Mm-hmm. That we just talked about. And now you said POTUS said, oh, don't worry about it because you'll still be covered. So what's the problem?
Well, no. POTUS didn't. The Supreme Court said they would still have access to it. The president, or at least the White House secretary, came out and said that you're putting women in jeopardy.
Gotcha.
So they were definitely against the ruling. And as I was saying earlier in the episode, Cheryl, with Ken before we had you in here, and I know that you probably remember because we were talking about it before this show started. But I was honestly in one position because I didn't have enough information. When I first heard about the case, what little information I had, I felt like the government was trying to step in, which I do not like when they overstep their authority. And
agree.
And it seemed to me like they were forcing a company to behave in a manner that I felt that they didn't have the right to do. And to a degree, and I know all listeners are banging their heads against their headphones and whatnot going, but they're not people. I know, we'll get to that. Mm-hmm. But where I'm at is I felt like it was just another example of the government extorting Hobby Lobby specifically that, hey, if you don't like what we've set up, we're gonna shut you down. And when questioned, they say, oh no, we're not going to shut you down, but you do have to pay a $1 million a day fine, which will shut your business down. So
they're big, they're not that big.
Exactly. So there does have to come a point where you do have to realize that there is a level of extortion that comes along with this Affordable Care Act with corporations. And I've been struggling with this because there's so much I want to say.
Right.
But Ken's laughing at me. But
the thing that I keep thinking and that I could find no information about online was, instead of this $1 million fine, was it ever offered to Hobby Lobby? You know what? We think you're a bunch of a-holes. But you know what? The money that you're contributing towards these people's insurance plans through your company give it to them in cash, let them subsidize purchasing, the Affordable Care Act.
That is a fiscal conservative mindset. I'm surprised that wasn't given to them.
Well, and I mean, it's not the solution I want because it doesn't address, any of the civil rights issues and the war against women's rights. But when it comes dollar for dollar, I think that probably is a fiscally responsible
and there were
negotiation.
Sure. No, I agree. And unfortunately that didn't happen. But there were definitely one of the things that some people I've been talking to about this whole issue, one of the things that was brought up was that they basically just usurped the law and went right to the Supreme Court for an exemption. And here's my position. I don't know if you remember, but when the Affordable Care Act was first rolled out, there were a lot of exemptions being handed out to the administration, to Congress, to a lot of people. It was not being extended to Hobby Lobby, obviously.
It was to the important people with the money, not to the people that
the decision makers.
Not the people that tell me stencils 6 days a week.
Right. So, oh man, I got so many jokes.
And as I said earlier, I think that this is a case of Hobby Lobby just not being cool with the Affordable Care Act in the first place. And I would rather, and that's fine, that's a totally separate issue. And I would wish that they would just be honest about it and just oppose the Affordable Care Act as a whole versus just trying to, pick and choose the little the religious freedom angle.
Right, and we'll definitely get into that. But so here's the real issue: is did Hobby Lobby as a corporation actually have any civil liberties?
No.
Why not?
Absolutely not. They're not a person.
Well, see, now here's the issue, and I couldn't wait for you to talk about this. The precedents that you fear, there was a different precedent that was set a little while back with another corporation. I believe it was the United case, where it was considered, it was ruled that the corporation is in fact a person. So whether you agree with that or not, the precedent has already been set that in one case, the ruling was a corporation is in fact a person and therefore does have civil rights.
Did that supersede the Religious Freedom Restoration Act?
But see, that's the whole point, is...
This ruling supersedes it.
Right.
And it protects the religious liberty of humans who own and control the companies, not the companies themselves.
And that's the concern that I have is the only reason why they were even considered for the religious freedoms that are protected under the Constitution is because there were precedents in the past that were set that corporations are in fact to be treated as individuals. And that's, I think, the only reason why they were able to even go that far. So the real problem is that corporations are legally, presently, defined as a person, and that, I think, is what we need to fix.
Corporate personhood.
Exactly.
An American legal concept that a corporation may be recognized as an individual in the eyes of the law. This doctrine forms the basis for legal recognition that corporations, as groups of people, may hold and exercise certain rights under the common law in the U.S. Constitution. For example, corporations may contract with other parties and sue or be sued in court the same way as natural persons or unincorporated associations of persons. Mm-hmm. The doctrine does not hold that corporations are flesh and blood people apart from their shareholders, executives, and managers, nor does it grant to corporations all of the rights of citizens.
So that's it right there, right there.
Rights when it benefits them and not rights when it doesn't.
So the problem with that legislation, Ken, would be that they didn't specify which rights that they would be covered and which rights they would not be.
Right.
And so
which
therefore...
sort of leaves that little legal gray area that they can...
Come on, legislators. This is the problem. We've got to work a little harder when it comes to writing these documents out.
Yeah, write it correctly, write it clearly, write it all-encompassing. If you're going to leave a loophole, at least let us know what the hell you're trying to leave it open for.
And I doubt that in that case, the United case, that they were looking to create a religious freedom opening. Maybe, but I doubt it. But I'm sure that there's some very crafty attorneys who saw the writing and said, hey, here's a hole. Let's go this route. And I think that's what happened.
It just seems to me like it gives the corporation the ability to sue, or vice versa. It gives a person the right to sue a corporation as a whole.
And that may not. I mean, yeah, no, it is. You can hear my brain literally on fire right now. It's crazy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more specifically, because you can't have this conversation without talking about the statement that was made by the United States, the secretary, the press secretary, the new guy. I don't even remember his name. I know Jay Carney's gone, so we got a new guy now. But the president's press secretary came out and said that the Supreme Court ruling has now put women's lives in jeopardy. I know that I've got a penis, but I don't see that. Can you help me understand that? Because every argument I've heard so far, I think that sounds a little bit emotional and not legitimate.
I think it is very dramatic. I think it was...
Watch it now, Cheryl. Watch it.
I think it was said... I know I'm sounding all dramatic. I think it was said to mobilize women.
Okay.
I do not think it is accurate in most cases. I think it puts women's rights in danger.
Sure.
Clearly. I think it can have an effect on my health and my well-being and my reproductive rights and my actual reproductive process. But imminent death is not in my future.
Okay, so you're...
God willing, hopefully.
Right. So it's not like, women need to stay out of the Hobby Lobby, because if they go in there, they're going to be forced to have babies right there in the cashier's aisle.
Their uterus will explode on impact.
Boom! And my real issue here is that, let's be honest here, working at the Hobby Lobby is kind of birth control enough, if you know what I mean.
I know, right? I don't want to be like the Pinterest mom. So I would recommend. I don't even think I've ever been in a Hobby Lobby, because I disagree with a lot of the things that they stand for. So instead of...
I just disagree. I have a starch objection to crafting, so I don't.
Yeah, I disagree with it wholeheartedly.
Anything with hot glue, I'm down. No.
I tried hot glue once, and I burned myself like 8 times. I'm like, who the hell does this to themselves?
We need to ban hot glue guns.
Hot glue is dangerous to my reproductive health.
All right. Oh, man, so many jokes.
Speaking of, I just have to say as an aside, I had an ex-girlfriend who was into crafting and scrapbooking, and she used to take these pictures that fans would bring me from my wrestling events and put them into these little craft books and present them to me. And
But even she didn't work at Hobby Lobby, right?
No. But she shopped there very often.
And let's say this, to Hobby Lobby's credit, like was brought up, they do a lot of stuff for their employees that most companies actually weren't doing. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's not like they're just these terrible, devil horn wearing monstrous organizations. But they, like Ken said, they took a hard stance on something, and they won, but I really think they shouldn't have. And
when someone takes a hard stance on something and they stick with it, whether I think it's right or wrong, I respect the crap out of that. A strong opinion that you don't waver on, even if I think you're an idiot, there's a certain amount of respect that I give you for that.
Okay. Or is that just stupid?
Me or that?
No, I mean, if somebody's just like, okay. if somebody is
if I'm unwavering in my hatred for Jews, would you respect me?
That Hitler is a respectable guy.
I suppose I would draw a line at some point. I usually use that when I'm talking about George W. Bush, and everyone gets it. So I guess I either should have prefaced it a little bit more, or narrowed my scope.
There you go. There's your problem right there. Hitler never smiled enough. That was the issue. What a great poem. Hitler's Smile.
Oh,
we'll have to work on that.
You can use that for your stand-up routine.
No. Okay, so my stand-up routine puts women's lives in jeopardy. Okay, so let's get into the realistic part of this here, which is the debate on why they even argued for it, and this was the specific types of birth control. This was the morning after pill, and I think you said was the IUD.
Right.
Yep. First of all, let's talk about the varying forms of birth control that are on the market right now that are legal.
Mm-hmm.
We've got condoms, one of my personal favorites. We've got
Sponges.
The sponges. Hate them.
I know, me too. I used to be in high school, man. Oy.
Diaphragms. I never trusted those.
Sterilization.
Okay. That's. Are you talking? Okay.
Woman's perspective.
Are you talking about like tubal ligation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just had the E-Shore procedure. They put coils in my fallopian tubes, scar tissue build, completely blocked, no problemo.
Okay. So far the stuff that we've talked, and of course the commonly referred to hormone as the pill.
Right.
So those are the ones that are currently legal on the market that are fertilization process procedures.
Mm-hmm.
They are preventative measures before the act of intercourse. That's a little too medical for me. Okay. Those, for the most part, I believe Hobby Lobby doesn't have an issue with.
I agree. They said most hormonal birth controls, so I'm not sure which they exclude, but I mean, most is most, so I don't necessarily have.
I'm not sure. I don't have an understanding of the IUD issue. That's still also pre-intercourse, so that's preventative. So I have no idea.
Is it sort of?
No, there's a fertilized egg though. There's a fertilized egg, and what the IUD does is it prevents it from implanting.
Okay.
But it also, if memory serves me correctly, it also serves as sort of at least an attempt to block the sperm from getting there in the first place. But if one happens to sneak by the goalie,
as they do,
then the IUD like sort of thins the
lining of the uterus.
Lining of the uterus.
Okay.
And,
okay.
The only one I looked at was copper, and it didn't have that because I couldn't do hormones. But there is a hormonal version, and it's very, very possible that it does what you had just said.
So maybe that was the ones that they're.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't even necessarily care. I want to, for the sake of press and for the sake of information and education, I want to get it out there. So. Okay, so those are the most commonly known methods of preventative birth control. Then there are post-fertilization methods that are on the market that are legal. There is the morning after pill. Was it the 1 day or the 2 day or whatever?
Yeah.
The oh crap pill or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I believe there's two versions of. There's one that you can get over the counter and one that requires a doctor's prescription for.
Right.
Wow,
and they're both about $50.
Okay.
Which not a lot to me, but to someone at Hobby Lobby, it might be a lot to them.
Yeah, and I just took one yesterday, and I'm fine. So.
Oh, good.
Sorry, that was.
Did you get a little buzz? Did you get a little buzz from it?
Well, I'm just going to stay right here until we talk about our sexism episode.
And not to be a downer, but I've got to tell you, I have taken Plan B on 2 occasions.
Okay.
Once I was raped.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody was going to not give me $50 for that. And once I was with an old boyfriend and the condom broke. And that was not my fault. That was not my cause either.
Wow. So. Okay. Yeah. See,
But the religious person or the hard right religious person will say, well, it was you chose to have sex in the first place in that second occasion.
I agree.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no.
They might also say my skirt was really short, but we probably don't need to get into that argument.
All right.
Rape culture.
Okay. First of all, Cheryl, didn't know that about you, and I'm really impressed that you were open to share that.
Yeah.
I think that's really amazing, and it's one of these things where, well, hey, let's keep going. Let's keep going because there's more to discuss here. There are then there's the actual medical procedure of fetal termination. Mm-hmm. Where are we at with that legally right now? What's considered life right now?
It depends.
24 to 27 weeks.
24 to 27 weeks. Is that what it is?
I think that's the cutoff.
Cheryl, I know you have an opinion on this matter.
I do.
I'd like to hear that opinion, and I think you're going to be really impressed when you hear Ken's opinion.
My opinion is that first trimester abortions, I think through the first trimester, I think it's a choice that should be afforded to women. My view of when life begins is the point at which the fetus can sustain life outside of its mother. And with medical technology advancements, that's getting younger and younger and younger. But I think clearly first trimester is covered in the fetus.
I'm just going to raise the question here.
And I have 2 children.
I'd just like to raise the question here, and I would just like to say that I would preface this with the fact that I agree with you. However, and I guess this just popped into my head today.
I knew this was going to happen. This is great.
Okay, you give birth to a baby. It can now sustain life outside of the uterus. Well, not without your help. You can't just let that baby lay there and it's going to take care of itself. It's going to feed itself. It's going to find food. It's going to find water. It's going to find... You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
does that negate its life?
I don't believe so, but I'm just raising the question.
No, I don't believe so either. I think once it can actually survive, even if it's 6 months in the hospital, 18,000 different IVs and incubators, all kind of the whole rigmarole that goes with like the uber preemie kids, it is actually capable of being alive outside of its mother, thanks to the advances in medical technology. And I would acknowledge that is a baby.
Do you know that in Jewish law, the fetus is regarded as a part of the mother's body until, and not a separate being until childbirth?
When did you start honoring Jewish law, Ken? I'm just curious.
That is fascinating. I never knew that.
This is the Old Testament law.
Well,
which you hold so truthful.
Old Testament, yeah.
No, but so many people do, and I find it interesting that, and here again, when it's convenient, we follow Old Testament law. When it's inconvenient, we disregard it.
Wow. Ooh, you hear that, Christians? I hope that stung a little bit.
Well, and there's also the scientific community, because they don't consider it, when they consider a fetus to become viable, it's totally different. Again, too much information, but it kind of holds here. I had a miscarriage at 13 weeks, and, they handed me the products of conception. And that's what they called it. And that's
here's a question.
That's what it was.
And Cheryl, I'm gonna ask you a really hard question here.
I know what you're gonna ask me.
Okay. Did you feel like you lost a life when that happened?
Because I wanted the baby, and I was happy about the baby, and I was going to build a life around the baby, I permitted myself to think about it as a baby.
So, in your defense, you would feel that the government should not be involved in that entire process whatsoever?
Absolutely not. They have no business in what goes on in my mind and my heart and my uterus.
And I agree with that. Ken.
Yes, sir.
You have talked about how your children came into this world.
Yeah.
And they were not of the conventional means that Cheryl spoke about.
Yeah, we used, my wife and I went through in vitro fertilization, where the doctors took one of my sperm and one of her eggs and combined the two and put them in a little petri dish.
You missed out on the best part.
He got a good part with his hands, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, I did.
In that little closet.
That little closet with all that porn and that weird sort of recliner.
Weird smell.
Okay, first of all, Cheryl shouldn't know that much about it. But anyway, okay, so you went through the process of IVF.
And we actually, I'd just like to say that, they implant the embryos at the stage of, I believe for the first 5 days it's considered a blastocyst.
Mm-hmm.
It goes from zygote, which is about 12 to 16 cells, to a blastocyst, which is a collection of like 150 cells. And then I believe is it 2 weeks? That's when they do the procedure. But actually, we have 5 in the freezer right now.
Mm.
So are those human lives? A lot of people, a lot of my very religious, conservative friends think that they are. You have frozen babies in a freezer.
Can you freeze a baby and can you take a baby and freeze it?
No, they're not popsicles. But I mean, that's what they say, or that's what they think. And
right.
If that's when conception, is in your mind when life begins, then they're holding true to what they think with their thought process. But I think it's ridiculous.
Okay, and let's get the faith and religious stuff out of the equation. This is one of the main reasons why I enjoy having Ken on this show with me.
Science.
Let's just talk about science for a minute. And I'm only here, and I hate that the term is called devil's advocate, but if I'm playing devil's advocate, I want to ask you both a very simple scientific hypothetical question.
Absolutely.
Rover lands on Mars, finds a single-celled organism with the capability of replicating into 2 cells or whatever. Would we claim that we found life on Mars? This genuinely just popped into my head, and I want to throw that out as a bomb. Let's just, what do we think? Because you and I both know we would. Let's just say it's Martian, so we don't know how it works. We don't understand their physics. Let's just say we find a single cell organism, and then it replicates into a 2-cell organism, and then what I mean?
I have an absolute answer. Do you want my rationale or just my answer?
An absolute answer?
I have an absolute answer.
So you already have the answer that's right.
But I have my absolute, my final answer.
All right, what's your Martian absolution?
You don't want to use a lifeline?
I don't need a lifeline. I might phone home to Mars.
This is intense.
It is absolutely life. It is sustaining outside of the body of another thing. It is on its own, breathing, eating, whatever it needs to do to sustain itself. And reproducing to boot.
So we would come back to the United States, we would come back to the world, Earth, and say, we have found life on Mars.
Heck yeah, and we're calling it Cheryl.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't, there are all kinds of life forms on this Earth that we deem to be, pests that we try to eradicate. Bacteria, flies, frickin' mosquitoes.
But science also shows us that these are necessary pests.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Oh, absolutely. But, do these single-cell organisms have brains? Do they have feelings, thoughts, emotions? Do they have...
So if they don't, does that mean they're not alive?
Well, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not alive. I wouldn't put them on the same level playing field with a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And neither, I wouldn't put the 5 embryos that are in the freezer right now that my wife and I have in cryo, I wouldn't put them on the same playing field as I would. I wouldn't put them on the same playing field with my 2 kids that I have that went through gestation and were born and have survived outside of their mother's womb for the last 6 months.
I would recommend moving them to a different shelf away from Walt Disney, but the
Huh? What? Everyone went over my head.
Walt Disney's head is cryogenically frozen.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. You know they're great
John-
jokes when you have to explain them.
Right.
Right next to John Wayne.
There you go. Okay, so that's really interesting. So here's the real question, and I didn't think we'd get to this in this episode, but hey, let's do it anyway, because why not? You have a position on this. Cheryl has a differing position on this. I have a differing position on this. Who gets to say?
What are they that much different?
No, I mean they're similar.
What I guess I'm not seeing the differences in our opinions.
Okay, I know that when my wife was pregnant with my daughter,
yep,
and I believe we were at, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, they did an ultrasound, and I didn't see, humanoid creature, but I did see a heart beating. Mm-hmm. And I said, "What's that flutter?" And the doctor said, "That's the heartbeat." And at that moment, I said, "Oh my God, it's beating. It's alive." At was it 4 to 6 weeks or whatever. So at that stage, and again, it's not a legal thing, it's not a religious thing, just in my heart, just like you said, Cheryl, in my heart, my child was alive at that point. But that was a personal decision. Can we all agree on that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So it's considered by many in the scientific community that at 4 to 6 weeks it's not a life. And they use the same basis as you just used for the Martian thing. Mm-hmm. So my question is, when I saw it with my own eyes, when I could feel it with everything that I had, I know that it's emotional, so I'm respecting that that's only holds so much water. No pun intended. But why am I right for me and wrong for other people? And who gets to really make that decision? Do you know what I mean?
I think that people get to make their own decision. That's what being a liberal feminist is.
Sure. So somebody who, and this is my honest, and guys, this is so important for me to talk about because this is where I'm honestly at. I don't always agree with what the church says. I don't agree with what all the Christians say and what religious people say. So this is my conundrum. Mm-hmm. I saw my daughter's heartbeat, and because she, cooked long enough, became a human being, and she's here, I can still equate back to that time when I saw that. And thank goodness that science was capable of letting me do that. But, if someone else makes a decision to terminate, and for whatever reason, it's not my place to decide if they made the good decision or not. But when I hear them say, "Oh, it wasn't a life," that it does hit me. It does. Not anything to do with God, not anything to do with faith, but as a father, it does hit me. And I want to know, granted, and I respect the fact that it wasn't my life, it wasn't my situation. I should have no say in that. But, Ken, in the last episode we talked about this, when we are a government and we start dictating laws, where is that line?
I believe that it rests with the individual, and the individual, if that woman feels this is a part of my body and I don't want this part of my body at this particular moment, at this particular time, I feel that she has the right to terminate that pregnancy. I personally am not. I personally wouldn't want my wife to do it. Mm-hmm. But if she chose that, hey, I'm just not ready for this. This is, you take this, and I don't mean to make this into a reductio ad absurdum, but
I have no idea what that is.
You take something, you reduce it to its most absurd level, its most extreme case scenario.
Okay.
So, you take away birth control, you take away all forms of birth control, and you take away abortion. And now you've got tons and tons. I mean, people are going to have sex, right?
Sure.
Yep.
We're animals. People are going to have sex means that people are going to get pregnant. You're going to have tons of unwanted, unplanned pregnancies that, sorry folks, you got to carry these things to term, these babies to term.
Unless you work at Hobby Lobby.
Unless you work at Hobby Lobby.
Sorry, I had to do it.
No, especially if you work at Hobby Lobby.
I guess now, yeah.
And at a time when every family that I know of my friends and relatives who have chosen adoption have gone overseas. So all these little babies born here, now you may continue.
Okay, yeah, well, see, now that you just opened up a whole new can of worms because there's a whole issue with that. But
these are going to be more unwanted babies, unfortunately. They're not wanted.
And this idea was visited in the documentary Freakonomics several years ago.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Where they looked at the correlation between Roe v. Wade, the decision in Roe v. Wade, and then something like 20 years later, the murder rate took a significant nosedive.
Right.
And they attributed that to the fact that these women were not having these unwanted pregnancies that went full term, that then became bastard children that they didn't care for and basically lived life on the streets and, became hard criminals who then go out and murder people. So exactly. If you terminate a pregnancy at 5 weeks today, would you rather terminate a pregnancy at 5 weeks today or let that carry that baby full term or force that mother to carry that baby full term, have it grow up in the streets, and then go on to walk into a bookstore and blow away 20 people?
Yeah, but you can't do that. You can't have a say on what they're going to do.
But when you look at the numbers and the statistics that show that there is a correlation between that.
Well, right, and I agree. When I watched that documentary, I definitely saw there was a correlation, but that's different than causation. But there's still some kind of a link between the two.
Okay, well, let me say this. Since Cheryl was so kind enough to be honest and open, I will say this. My mother got pregnant at 17, did not want to have the baby, went to get an abortion, and this is in the 70s, obviously, and last minute changed her mind out of fear and uncertainty, and she was a kid. She's 17. That whole argument doesn't work because I'm not a murderer. I'm not a piece of shit. So, well, it's debatable, but so to say that, oh, well, you are preventing a potential danger is silly, I think. Just as I mean, and I understand and respect.
Where did your parents grow up? Where did you grow up?
South side of Chicago.
South side.
I mean, yeah. I mean, did you grow up in the projects? I mean, did you grow up?
Not in the projects, but not far from them at all. I mean, I grew up in the hood. Absolutely did.
Did you have a father in your life? I
did not.
Well, your mother's quite amazing, isn't she?
She's a wonderful woman. But that being said, I would go so far as to want to point out that I respect science, I respect math, I respect statistics, but as we talked about with Nielsen ratings, sometimes those numbers aren't truthful. So
right. You can make statistics.
Yeah, you just can't say what is going to happen. I was in control of my life from as early as I can remember. Once I started making my own decisions as a child, I chose the path that I was on. I wasn't going to do drugs. I wasn't going to hold up liquor stores. This was my decision. Sure, there's people who make the other decision, but I don't think that terminating terminating a fetus is preventative for any other sake other than there's just less people. I understand that you don't agree with that, and that's fine.
I see your point, and I see, I was sort of in that same boat with my mother, but there are the other extreme cases
I'm sure there are.
There are people who are born into wonderful families. There are people who are born into mediocre families. And there are people who are born, unfortunately, into really, really shitty families.
Sure.
And being born into a really shitty family is one of the hardest things to escape.
Sure.
To overcome, I'm sure. There's no resources to help you.
But again,
their parents don't know any better.
Right.
But
so
again,
therefore,
here's
they
a great
don't
example.
know any better.
You raise a really good point. Is social Darwinism the right tool? Because that's really what it is.
No, that's.
Well, I mean, let's if we terminate kids who would potentially grow up in the projects and let's just be honest, bad hood areas, low economic areas, bad places to raise families. Isn't that just social Darwinism? Instead of name calling, let's take it a step further backward and say, well, let's try to solve a different problem. A great example is Africa.
Oh,
Look at the AIDS issue in Africa. Well, they're going to have sex. They're going to do things. They're going to, well, now look at the effort that's being put forth on preventative care and research and stuff like that. And look at the amount that the AIDS level has dropped in Africa since the 80s, since this whole thing has been, I mean, not to be like, oh, look at Bono, but, I mean, let's be honest. The guy did really revolutionize that kind of...
He did a lot.
Yeah, he did a lot. And so I would argue that if the problem is we don't want children raised in these areas, what are we doing to change the situation? Do you know what I mean?
Education.
Boom.
Education is the biggest life changer. There was a guy who came to speak at our church, Nicholas Kristoff. He does lots of humanitarian work, and he said, you need to look at what they need in Africa and give it to them. They had just built this gigantic school with, the name and a monument to the person who funded it. And kids weren't going, and he asked them, and they're like, I have my period, and I don't have anything to put in my, in my underwear, so I'm embarrassed to go to school. So take your $1 million building and find out what's really needed.
Yep.
And what's really needed is the ability to educate, especially young girls. Not in a fancy school, in just a regular place, for Christ's sake. Just get them some damn books and not the Taj Mahal.
Yep.
Education of especially women in Africa is key to everything. They have less children that way. I mean, the statistics are stunning.
Well, listen, Cheryl, I absolutely thank you for joining us. I don't want to cut you short, but we do have another person who wants to hop on and talk with us for a little bit, so I want to get to that. Okay. You are awesome. We absolutely love you for coming on. Thank you so much.
We'd love to have you back again.
Absolutely.
For another topic.
Hey,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
I had a wonderful time, guys, and I can't wait to listen to everyone.
Absolutely. Cheryl, thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye.
All right, so from New Jersey, we've got Dave Maresca on the line. What's going on, Dave?
Not much. Apparently a lot less than out there, guys. How you guys doing with the storms and everything?
I'm doing good here in Chicago. We got the worst of it yesterday, or 2 days ago, but I think you're about to get hit pretty bad with some hurricane weather, right?
Yeah, it may impact the 4th of July celebrations a little bit, but we'll see what we can do about that. We're keeping our fingers crossed.
Yeah, Ken and I are sitting pretty in the northern Midwest, so we're good.
The sun is shining brightly here.
Yeah, I got a few clouds here in Chi-Town, but we're all right. Yeah, we had some tornadoes here, literally in my area a couple nights ago. That was nice and scary, going down in the basement with the air raid sirens. But I got air raid sirens going off right now across the United States because the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby, a corporation considered a person for religious freedoms. Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm no stranger to conspiracy theories, so this is just one more piece in the puzzle of our country.
Is this the Illuminati's doing, Dave?
It's falling apart, man. It does feel kind of like... It just, what it is? The thing that gets me is if this were in an action movie in the 1980s, everybody would be like, oh yeah, that was horrible, that was wrong, what are they thinking? But here it is happening in 2014, and some people are kind of like, yeah, that's how it should be. And to me, it's just horrifying that people are are just going to sit back and let our sort of lives be governed by so many other people whose beliefs are going to be different than ours. I kind of thought that that wasn't how things were supposed to be. And it just, I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to do now when the highest court in the land kind of makes a decision. Isn't that supposed to be sort of end game, like final moment, like that was it? And we now have to...
One of the common things I was hearing amongst the rabble was...
Sorry. Glad member of the rabble.
was that this was an example of being told no by mom and then going to dad.
I could see that. But how do we feel about having to break down the way our country works now into such a childish sort of formulation? Like, why isn't it okay to just let everybody live their own lives and make their own decisions about things like health care and birth control?
No, you're right. And I don't think you have any arguments from Ken or myself. I think... What?
I was just going to say, we're not allowed to make our own decisions as far as healthcare goes now. I mean, we're being forced into something.
Yes, I will definitely support that. And what I was going to take that a step further and say is that it's now being a mandate. And let me just put this out there, because I don't know if we'll ever talk about Obamacare any other time. Maybe we will. I don't know. But as an American, I absolutely support the idea of a national health care service. I do. I like what Europe has to a degree. I have no problem with some of my tax dollars going to something like that. And you don't have to agree with me. That's fine.
No.
What I don't agree with is being. First of all, I don't like the way this healthcare was set up, and I don't like the fact that I'm being forced and mandated to do it. All of my friends in Britain and in Scotland are like, well, yeah, our plan is nothing like the Affordable Care Act. And that says something. And it's like, okay, the ideal is the good, but because, I mean, whoever says I don't want to help somebody in need is an asshole.
Well, that's kind of to me, that's a lot of where some of this stems from when you just take a step back and look and say, why is it so hard for us to think that one size can't really fit all? Even if there's a one-size-fit-all idea, help everybody, right? But I think the easiest way for everybody to understand it would be if it was you and you had a certain condition that was going to be decided on by a whole bunch of other people who might not suffer from it or might not ever be touched by it, might not have anyone in their families ever deal with it, but they're going to decide whether that should be something you get help to deal with or not. That is the part where it breaks down. If everybody were looking at it from as if it were happening to them, the worst case scenario, whatever it would need to be, then they would say, oh yeah, I get why this is kind of messed up, the way that we're kind of all being picky and bitchy about it. You know, it's sort of, if we're all here together, if we're all supposed to be able to be patriotic about the same place, we should all be able to get the same kind of help. You know what I mean? Whatever that is, for whatever your condition is. And when we have decisions like this being made by, these are supposed to be role models. These are people we look up to, the pillars of our country, and they're kind of surprising us with the way they decide on it. It's kind of like, to me, it's disheartening.
But these were the same men and women who were considered heroes just a few weeks ago when gay marriage was no longer a band. Right?
I agree. That's a slippery slope, I guess, being in those seats. You know what I mean? But it's still going to upset some people. But to me, I think there's a lot of humanity that's lost in the fact that it gets to be an argument that we're all, using against each other.
I can definitely see that. I think where I've kind of fallen, where my coin has stopped spinning, is I respect that the owners of Hobby Lobby have religious beliefs. I respect that. I respect that they, and by they I mean the Green family, which is the CEO of Hobby Lobby. The Green family has a right to feel any way they want to feel. However, this is not just them.
Yeah, and do they employ only Christians? Do they employ only Christians who believe
because
specifically?
No, because that would be illegal.
Well,
right? I mean, isn't that discrimination against any other? I mean, there's too many. Right. There's no way they could. There's protected classes that would prohibit them from only employing Christians. Now,
well, but what if it's their religious belief? If it's their religious belief, that they only employ people that believe what they believe.
Well, see now, and I think this law, or that this case that they just won, I think will allow them to behave that way. And now you're going to have a whole lot of craziness. Here's my point, which I was trying to make, is before Ken rudely interrupted me. No, not at all.
Simply clone threw you off too.
I've been known to do that.
Simply put, what I was trying to say is, and when somebody's saying all these nice things about Hobby Lobby, you know there's going to be a but. I respect all of that, but the religious freedom defense was probably the most detrimental to our constitutional rights that they use. And I think if the company wanted to fight for its right to not be mandated on how to deliver what would have been considered a benefit up until the Affordable Care Act was made law, I think they have a right to fight that. But like Ken pointed out earlier before Dave was on the show, they kind of hitched their wagon to this particular issue, and winning wasn't really winning, if you know what I mean.
It was a short-sighted victory to give away the war, something much darker possibly, in my mind. You know, it's a landmark, and once you have a landmark, that's what a lot of the future is going to be based on. I think one of the first articles I read about it was, all right, guys, so now this decision is made, you have to keep this in mind going forward. Like, this was a memo circulated to all the lower courts.
Well, that's what precedence is.
And so it sort of instantly now shapes the future. And it's interesting that you guys just released the Church and State episode talking about how that was supposed to not...
It's almost like that was intentional.
It's like, but this is now, there's a bridge being built, you know, in a place that was supposed to have a giant canyon between it. And this is going to be one of those, you know, cornerstone moments that they use for that. And I think to go to the religious argument about it, I even go back to your gay marriage episode, and we talk about how the religion aspect of sort of condemning homosexuality, but you're still supposed to love the person. That's part of what that religious belief is. Does this, winning this supposed victory, does that fall within those same doctrines?
Quit puffing us up, telling us to listen to other episodes.
I'm just saying, guys, you set the stage very well for this to be happening in the world. Well done.
And you know, like, I don't find any precedence in the Bible where this is mandated.
It didn't exist.
Like I said, Jewish law says it's not a baby. It's not considered a life until it comes out of until it's born.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin.
There are some parts in the Old Testament that talk about, there's a case in Exodus where that's the only time they ever talk about abortion or an accidental abortion is in Exodus 21, where it says, when men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other misfortune ensues, the one responsible shall be fined, as the woman's husband may exact from him the payment to be based on judge's reckoning. But if other misfortune ensues, the penalty shall be life for life. So apparently this was a common thing where men would fight and beat women to the point where they would have miscarriages.
What does life for life mean?
Apparently, if what I read here is that the woman is chattel here. She's a piece of furniture.
Oh God.
Sorry.
Just get through it. Just get through it.
She's basically just a piece of furniture. I see nothing, about her misfortune or her suffering or her pain or agony or anything like that. It's just if the fetus is discharged because of the fight or because of the push, a judge will determine a certain amount of money that is owed to the father. And if other misfortune ensues, I'm assuming that means, if a man is killed or a woman is killed, then the penalty shall be life for life.
Okay, so they're not talking about the fetus anymore.
Nope.
Okay. That when you said life for life, I was like, wait. No, that's fine, because it would have been interesting. But
it's not considered a life.
It's like how do they life for life that one? Like, all right, that's a chicken's worth right there.
I would have been literally confused. I would have like, wait a minute, because I didn't think that. Okay, and I'm not trying to set. Who the hell am I kidding? Of course I want to start fires. This is push the button.
Yeah.
I find it really ironic, and I'm only saying this just to start flaming a little bit. I find it really ironic that the people who are claiming that unborn babies are not people are the same people who in the 60s said that Africans were not people.
Yeah.
There's a little irony to be had there. I'm just saying.
And then there's also the tendency of looking at people who are pro-life and also pro-war. So it's kind of like, well, as long as you prolong the life 18 years or more and put a gun in its hand, it's okay. It's kind of an interesting. I mean, to go back to Hobby Lobby, they're not going to cover birth control, but their plan.
Thanks for bringing us back to this.
I'm just going to say this.
That's good.
They will cover Viagra and vasectomies. So the guy's side of reproduction, no problem.
And we squared away. And we already did cover beforehand, to give Hobby Lobby some level of credibility, is they do cover all preventative birth control methods that we're aware of. It's the fetal terminating methods that they are standing against. And again, this is one of those things where, hey, okay, here's my QED on the whole thing. I personally do believe that, to a degree, once so many cells have replicated and there's a heartbeat that's happening, at least at 4 to 6 weeks, that it is a life. You don't have to agree with me. That's fine. I also respect my American law. And the way the laws are right now, it really doesn't matter what I believe. What Hobby Lobby did, I think, was deplorable. Not on a religious sense, not on a faith sense, but on an American sense. I feel that what they did was wrong. And I know I'm pissing off Christians, but I don't care. It's not about Christianity. It's about what this country is. And once again, it's not hard to separate church and state, but we first got to learn how to do it in our own minds. And not enough people are doing that. And I think we're going to continue to get away with it as we keep raising up generation after generation without educating them. I think, Ken, you nailed it earlier with education. We've got to teach our young generation about what it means to be an American, what our Constitution says, what we were founded on, and where we want to go, what the idea of America is. And then, hopefully then, it'll be in their hands. Well, it's going to be in their hands regardless, but hopefully they'll have the right tools necessary to legislate according to what is really best for this country. But as it stands right now, we're not doing that. The generation that we're living in right now is not doing it. It's legislating out of stuff that has nothing to do with separation of church and state, and that is a big, big problem. And this is a warning sign that we had from our founding fathers, and we're failing. And so we need to get to a point where we have to really start asking the question of, what do we do about it? So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, this is the headline knee-jerk reaction generation, right? We're all connected to these little media devices, and if you're only reading the headlines and that's what you're making your decisions on, yeah, you really need to go deeper. So, I don't know.
That's unfortunately what most people do. We live in a society that is largely uneducated and uninformed, except for those little sound bites that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And I know we're in the business of creating those, so it's kind of ironic that we're kind of talking about, like, but I think
this is all Ken's fault. This was all his idea.
It's what ascribes the responsibility for us to make sure there's a reason, like that what we're saying has purpose. And I think this is us saying that we're kind of scared about what's happening to our country right now. You know, I could not be more horrified sometimes when we read these articles that say, look, no one's doing it yet, but look what's in the language of some of these laws that are getting passed while we're busy voting on American Idol. You know, it's kind of, it's one of those things that we have to kind of draw people's attention to. And it's because of cases like this that get through the net, and I don't want to be watching movies with my kids 20 years from now saying, yeah, that's how life used to be before it was all run by corporations and RFID chips and everything like that.
Yeah.
So thanks, Hobby Lobby. Thanks for starting that one.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'll say this to go along with my earlier point. Ken, I have no doubt, just from knowing you in the short time that I have, that you are going to raise your children in a manner that you're going to educate them.
Yeah.
Because I see the passion that you have for our country. And just as I hope you trust that I'm going to do the same thing with my children.
Absolutely.
My teenager right now is actually out of state. She's checking out colleges because she wants to be a journalist. She's very passionate about America and the way we have a freedom of press, and she sees the hypocrisy in press right now. And I love, I don't always agree with her, but I love hearing her say, I don't agree with that. I don't like that. They shouldn't be doing it like this. And I'm like, yes, now go learn how to do it better. And with my youngest, same thing. We talk about, the founding fathers. We talk about the Constitution. I personally, not to say I'm better than anybody else, but I personally make it a point to read the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence every 4th of July. And I'm getting to do it again.
That's fantastic.
Not enough people do it. And it's one of those things where we definitely need to do that. So as fathers...
What a boring 4th of July.
Well, it's free on your iPad, man.
The Constitution is a pretty boring document, if you think.
If you don't care about, freedom or your way of life.
If you had known me last year, Ken, and Dave probably remembers this, but I made it a mission every day I would post a new section of the Constitution.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, every day I posted it on my Facebook wall, and I loved just watching people tear it up. And all I did was just say, this is what it says. Boom. And it was just one of those things where it was, let's just educate people. So anybody, can do it. But there you have it. So Hobby Lobby, right or wrong, kind of a dick move.
I've never even heard of them before this either, so of course, I'm not going to shop there now. I'm just like, whatever.
And if we truly had free markets, this would be easily solved.
Mm-hmm.
Because we would just say, you're done. We're not shopping there anymore. And then they would go out of business.
It's so hard to actually get that kind of a concerted effort behind something these days, though. You'd think with all this communications and connections it would be, but it's because that there's this ideological thing that happens right here. What we're addressing.
Let me know when we all actually don't get gas on the same day. Let me know when it happens.
Well, that almost happened in Sandy, so it was kind of scary out here when that was going down.
And I'd say our country is so divided on these topics that, look what happened with Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I would say that was a huge success for them.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that really, I hate to bring them up, but, Eric Bischoff, great book. Controversy creates cash. That did nothing but that for Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
That's just one of those things. But hey, don't get hot. We got so many other things to talk about in the upcoming episodes. Dave, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me on. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
It was an honor to have you. Ken, do you have any parting words for the listeners about the Hobby Lobby snafu?
I disagree with it.
Yeah, I think pretty much
stated.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to us. Definitely give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Hit us up if you agree, disagree. It's totally cool. Email us just like everybody else does at pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter. Tell all your friends, your neighbors, your enemies, your parents, and that guy named Steve. I am David Vox Mullen.
And I am Mr. Anderson.
And remember,
don't get hot.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.